Education opens doors for the gospel, bringing hope to dark places and sparking lasting change around the world. At TeachBeyond, we're reaching the nations through education.
This is Transformed and Transformational, a podcast from TeachBeyond. I'm Kian.
And I'm Heather. We're exploring how the gospel transforms us and overflows to impact classrooms, communities, and the world.
Let's jump into today's conversation. I am still looking forward to this conversation with Chrischona and Koudjo Sodji. For a number of years, we worked at the same office in Chicago. Since then, we have both moved to different places, her family moving quite a bit further, but it is wonderful to be able to continue to overlap in different times and different places.
Absolutely. I'm excited to hear more of their story today.
Yes, Chrischona grew up as a missionary kid in Austria and then attended Taylor University in Indiana in the United States before moving to Chicago, where she lived for 20 plus years, both as a teacher and then working for TeachBeyond.
Koudjo grew up in a village in Togo, West Africa, and then his story intersected with Chrischona's when they met in the neighboring country of Benin. While their family was living in Chicago, Koudjo earned his bachelor's degree in world missions and intercultural studies from Moody Bible Institute. 3 years ago, they moved to Togo with their 4 kids.
Let's go over to that conversation now.
Welcome to the podcast, Chrischona and Koudjo.
Thanks. It's really special being here with you.
We are so excited to have you, and we are excited to connect. And your family lives in Togo, West Africa right now. And you guys previously lived in Chicago. I lived there kind of alongside you in the Chicagoland area. But you've called multiple places home over your lifetime. So I'm curious, what is it about each of the places you've lived that kind of feels like home to you?
I have lived in a few places because I grew up as a missionary kid in MK in Austria. So you add that one to your list, Kian.
Yeah.
So for me, Austria, I lived there 15 plus years, not counting the ones that go back during college. And I think what I really take back from home are the traditions, like all those childhood core memories, traditions, and probably in addition to traditions, like the mentality. There's a lot of this, like the practicality, the maybe a bit of frankness or directness of my Austrian upbringing. But I think that is still home because that's still something I carry with me, are those traditions and that mentality. And so, that's home for Chicago. That's really where we started our married life and our life with our kids. And I think what's home there is those shared activities, like those new traditions, right? But shared activities, shared friendships, shared way of life. And so that is also a bit of home because those are also things we now carry with us. And Togo, it's been 3 years now that this has been home. And I think for me, and maybe for both of us, but just home, it's a sense of ease, like a comfortableness that we have here now, where we know our way around, we know kind of how things are done, we know people, and so home is just that sense of we're comfortable here, and then again, family, like wherever we are, and our family is really home. So I would say that's kind of what it is for me. How about you?
Well, for me, home always feel like my birth village, and I grew up in a rural Togo where most of my life is school and going to the field and coming and playing with friends. So most of my childhood I spent in a rural setting, so I really enjoyed being in that setting until I moved to America, and we started our family there. We've lived in Chicago, and it's been a little bit struggle for me there in the U.S., but because of my wife and my children, it kind of helps me out. But I still always miss my village and my people. But coming back to Togo for ministry with my family now feels to me more easy because I'm still connect with my people, my village, while at the same time I still have my own immediate family, my wife and my children. So home is always my village to me. And I love being a rural boy.
He has a nickname, the village boy. So.
The village boy. That's funny. How far from where you grew up do you live now?
5 hours from where I grew up.
Okay, so same country, but still a bit of a distance from the village.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not really far. It's just that, a lot of it's on dirt roads. So, it
Right.
just takes a lot
Right.
longer. If you could just go on a highway, I don't know,
Yeah.
it's maybe an hour you'd be there.
No,
Wow.
3 hours.
Okay, 3 hours.
Depends on how fast you're going and how good
Yes.
that road is, right? Yeah. Well, it sounds like, what I'm hearing from both of you that home, a sense of home is the people you're with and the
Mhm.
traditions and kind of the things that you do in that place, more so than the things of that place. And I think a lot of people resonate with that, especially if they've lived in multiple different parts of the world, that our sense of home is a rootedness in our routines and the people that we're doing life
Mhm.
with. And so, of course, it's the week before Christmas. So I have to ask, what does celebrating Christmas look like for your family? I imagine there's an element of tradition and the people that you're with, and maybe some of your growing up. I don't know. But how do you integrate different cultures or different family traditions and how you celebrate Christmas?
Well, Christmas was always my favorite holiday, and I'm
Mm,
sure that's especially because of Austria and the many traditions that are surrounding by that. And so when we had start our own family, I wanted to bring all my traditions in. And it was actually quite easy to compromise because he had no Christmas traditions. So
oh,
as
wow.
much as like I
Okay.
wanted to honor like that part, I wanted us to, blend the cultures and things like that. There weren't actually really any Christmas traditions that were important to him or that his family was used to. So it was quite easy. I just got to kind of import all mine. But it did leave off, that other part. So yeah, Christmas traditions of like a real Christmas tree with real candles, and that's a huge part, and it's a huge part of like how we celebrate Christmas
Wow.
Eve, which is much more the focal point for us than Christmas morning. Having Advent was a big part growing up, and also
Uh-huh.
something then that our family did. Yeah, making Christmas cookies kind of before Christmas was another tradition that was important. When we moved here 3 years ago, it was really rough. Christmas, our first Christmas, we had moved in maybe a month before to our house. And we decided, we'd go to his village for Christmas, and that would be a good time to expose our kids to the village. But having zero of the traditions that they were used to, on top of being in a new country, was not a good idea for your first Christmas in a new country for them. So, there was no
Yeah.
tree, there
Yeah.
were no presents. Later on, we did
Right.
give presents later, but there were no presents. There was no snow. We didn't have the weather that we're used to with
Yeah.
Christmas. Christmas Eve services are quite different. So yeah, just like there was no Christmas baking because it's the village. Like you just eat the village food, and we eat Christmas dinner on the floor on a mat. And yeah, it was just
Yeah.
really, it was rough looking back. So since then, the last two Christmases, we've started incorporating those that we can incorporate back the traditions. But it's taking some creativity, like being used
Yeah.
to a real tree. I never wanted a fake tree, but I've just had to come to accept. And so last year we did have this scrawny fake tree, and it helped. It was kind of sad missing a little
Yes.
one, but having a tree was really important to the kids. And I'd
Yeah.
rather have a fake one than not a real one. So,
Sure.
um, yeah, so it's a bit of bringing in the old traditions, the ones we can. We have like one new tradition that I think we all like is now with Christmas we make tie-dye shirts for our whole family, and his brother's family
Oh,
lives next door to
fun.
us. So we've done that 2 years.
Okay.
If you've done it 2 years, it's a tradition. So, and we like it. We'll
That's
keep
right.
doing it. Well, totally random. Like, why would I ever tie-dye for Christmas? That was not like a Christmas growing up tradition. But so we're finding our way, but it's not been easy to kind of figure out what we can do here from the old.
Yeah. 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 That makes sense. Koudjo, I understand there weren't specific traditions that and like ways that people celebrate Christmas, but is Christmas celebrated in the village community? Like, is that a big part of that time of year?
Yes, Christmas is celebrated throughout villages in Togo, even though most people are not Christian. They do
Mm,
celebrate Christmas, and we do have a little bit of stuff we do around Christmas. And for the most part, each family at least will have some sort of pig slaughtered or goat or whatever animal they could afford on the Christmas
uh-huh.
Eve. And then they can make the special meal on Christmas Day. which mostly is rice and spaghettis, and served with drinks if they can afford, and kids will, everybody will happily eat and
Yeah.
go around with their new clothes. And that's the one special thing is that most
Yeah.
people could afford new clothes for their kids once a year, and it's around Christmas time. So around
Okay.
Christmas,
Yeah.
you see many kids working with new clothes, with whistle, blowing whistle around, or plastic watches and glasses. So it's
Fun.
one of the fun time growing up for me too.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was like as a village, you were celebrating, not just with an immediate family, right?
No, as yes, sometimes you do with your own family, but most of the time you go walk around the village and from home to home and eat at different people's house and
Yeah.
just enjoying being a Christmas time.
Nice. That's great. That's really great.
And see how those are hard to incorporate, right? Killing the pig, slaughtering the goat, it was a hard time incorporating that into Chicago. So,
Right, right, right. A little different. Well, there's a lot to your story of serving with Teach Beyond, but before we go way back and hear more about your growing up and your story of joining Teach Beyond, let's start off with what you're doing right now. So can you tell us a little bit about your roles with Teach Beyond, what that looks like day to day or on a normal week?
Yeah, I think for me, serving here with Teach Beyond is one of the greatest things that happened to me in my life. And I do serve in informal education, and most of the part I'm organizing sports activities for youth and children in the community, mostly the elementary through high school kids on weekly basis. And for the most part, it's been going great. I got to know more kids in our areas, and even if I'm walking around uh, out of no blue, parents or kids will say, "Hey, coach." So I'm kind of a little bit known in the areas. And on that side,
Mm,
also I also do P, or I serve as a P teacher in one of the Christian private school. And for the most part, it's just to do this, to use P, and through that share the gospel with the kids and encourage them to stay in their Christian walk. For those who are Christian and the one who are not Christian, try to encourage them to embrace Christ. So on weekly basis, it's more about uh, serving through sports and sharing the faith and encouraging children in the faith.
Have you always been interested in sports and athletic, Koudjo?
Yes, yes, growing up in the rural setting, soccer is the main sports we've ever played. So in one hand, I'm stuck with soccer, and even most of my ministry now is more about soccer, soccer, soccer. So
Which is football there, right?
yes, which we
Yeah.
call football here.
Chrischona, what does that look like for you?
yes, so I get to kind of do two joint roles, but one is the national director of Teach Beyond Togo. And I also get to be the director of our micro school. So I would say on a typical day, it's not necessarily split evenly, but there's some of both those roles in each day. So on the school side, especially working with our teachers, we have two teachers this year. Neither of them are trained teachers. And so just planning with them, brainstorming with them, doing things like that is more than a typical director would usually do with their teachers. So it's very hands-on. And then working with students. So we have only 7 students, but we have 6 grade levels. So with 2 teachers who are not trained teachers, the middle school and high school is a challenge. So I'm kind of responsible for those. A lot of that happens very independently and online, but I get to evaluate and kind of walk with them in that. So that's one part of my day. And then the other part is more the national director side. And with that, so in this recent time of strategic planning and budgeting at this time of year, looking back on how we're spending our money, how we're going to spend our money, getting to meet new people. That happens less often, but probably one of the best parts of both people who are interested here locally, So recently we had someone found us on TeachBeyond online and was interested. And so meeting with him. And tomorrow we have an online call with someone in college in Canada who's interested. So those are really fun times when people are interested, because one of the pieces is really expanding and building our team, because we're quite small. Right now we're 5 of us who are with TeachBeyond Togo. But yeah, it can include like end of the year fundraising appeal, which is currently on my list to do. We also on Saturday we have a Sparrow, so teacher training program that we started last month. So we have our next session. So we're busy getting ready and planning and preparing for that. Right now, also, we're getting ready to do like a report to the minister's office that happens once a year. And then we can request again to have authorization. So we did that last year, and now we'll request it again. And hopefully they'll see that we've been doing enough to grant us that registration. So yeah, those are some of the kinds of things that happen in my day.
Administrative work, networking, leading the school, investing in students and teachers. You get kind of the gamut of the school involvement, as well as building out what will TeachBeyond Togo look like in the next 5, 10, 15 years, which is big picture, right? And then sometimes you're right down into the details. So kind of both sides of that.
You mentioned 2 teachers. Are they expat teachers or are they Togolese teachers?
Yes.
The
short answer is yes. One of them is a complete local teacher. The other one is actually Togolese American, which is really an interesting mix. So she lived 12 years in Togo, moved to the States at 12 years old, and then moved back here at 24. So she is both Togolese local and American, which is an amazing mix, and only God can like bring you in connection with something like that. So she is, like I said, neither of them are trained teachers, but she has the expat local mixture.
That's amazing how God can pull those things together. Okay, there's so much more to hear about all of the ministries you guys are working on and like what those look like in the day-to-day. But let's go back. Let's start at the beginning to hear kind of your story about how you got to where you are now. So I'm curious, what was your first experience and first exposure to missions?
Okay, well, I was going to go first because I go back longer. So that's why the chronological age, but I'm also older. But so for me, I grew up as a missionary kid, an MK. So for me, it goes back all the way to age 3. My parents moved from the US to Austria. And so, yeah, I'm an MK, and my parents were missionaries until they retired. They ended up moving to Romania. But my exposure started very young, and I was part of it, whether I wanted to be or not. But I loved it. For me, the experience of growing up in Austria and growing up as a kid in different cultures was, I really have fond memories of that.
And for me, my exposure to mission was in the early 1990. There was an IMB missionary family in my village who were called the Broyles, and I been exposed to mission by becoming friend with their son, and from there things take direction in my life of being interested in mission in the future.
That's so interesting how you had such different exposures to missions, but then ended up coming together. I'm curious how the two of you ended up meeting each other. Was that part of your mission story, or how kind of take us forward to the next step here?
So I had been teaching in Chicago schools and was going to burn out. And so I needed a break. And I decided to take my break in Africa because I was always interested in just learning a new culture and language. And so my connection were these friends of these missionaries, so friends of friends. And so at that point, they had moved to Benin. And so I stayed with them for a few weeks while I was getting my footing, and he was also living with them. And so I wasn't there to work with them, but they connected me with some other things. So it is because of a missionary is actually how we know each other. Yeah.
That's great. Well, how did you two sort of step further into missions? And would you say that you felt a strong sense of calling? Like, for example, Chrischona, you grew up as an MK. Did you know that that's also what you wanted to do? Or was there that sort of a surprise to you later on? Or how did you two decide, okay, this is something we want to do together too?
Well, Like I said, I've lived with the brothers who were missionary in my village, and I did American homeschool with them for 5 to 6 years, something like that. And when we met in Benin in 2007, we became friends. And when she moved back to the state in 2007, we got married. And once we got married, we sensed that we've been called to serve. But at the same time, we didn't really know what role we would be playing if we come back to Africa. And so it took
Mm-hmm.
us few years, and then we'll keep saying that in 3 to 5 years we'll move, and it never happened until 2021 when we applied with TeachBeyond to come to Togo as a missionary. And by then, God gave us a clear vision of how we'll be doing. And then in the fall of 2022, we moved our family of 6 to Togo, and we've been here for these last 3 years, and it's been going well, serving and looking back how God has brought us so far.
That's amazing. And you mentioned applying to Teach Beyond in 2021 to start Teach Beyond Togo, but you've been a part of Teach Beyond for a lot longer than that. So I'm curious, how did you first hear about Teach Beyond and join?
I feel like from the beginning of like thinking, what do I want to do with my life after high school? And I was debating between teaching and social work, but it's always been on my heart to like be a help to those in need, and also just a heart for people who need specifically not just education is the route I went, but also need the good news of God. I ended up teaching in inner city America, inner city Chicago. And so I wasn't at that point really thinking like in terms of a specific missionary. I saw my role already as a public school teacher as being really impactful. And so it wasn't like, oh yeah, well, eventually I'll become a missionary, but I just felt like that was my calling for that time. It was when I took that year off. I call it a sabbatical. It was, public school teachers don't really get a sabbatical, but I took that year off to take a break so I wouldn't completely burn out and stop teaching. And I met him in Benin, and then eventually, more than a year, 2 years later, I guess from when we met, got married. And it was then that we both just felt this sense, like you described it, we would be back and serve God in Togo. Just didn't really know like what we would do. And yeah, that's when that really developed through my time with Teach Beyond. For me, I actually heard about Teach Beyond right when it was becoming Teach Beyond. So back in 2009, George Durance, who was the president of Teach Beyond at the time, he was just moving to the US to start Teach Beyond in the US. And he was looking for an assistant. And at that point, I had been teaching and was assistant principal, and my position was closed, so I was currently unemployed. I was also pregnant with our oldest, and so looking for something different than teaching, looking for something part-time. And we lived in a two-flat in Chicago, and my landlord upstairs came to me and said, I have this person I know. He used to be my high school principal, high school teacher back at this place called Black Forest Academy, which if you've been listening long enough, you've heard about BFA on this podcast. So her high school teacher was George Durance, the president of Teach Beyond. And so it wasn't my training to be an administrative assistant, but I love organization and detail. And I really loved that I could still support education. And then I could actually also be supporting missions by doing this role. So I could have never dreamed up this job myself and the perfect fit. But again, God knows this. And it was a perfect fit. Also personally, because I was working part-time and I had at that point then a young baby that was born. So, but it was during that time with Teach Beyond, it was just me working with Teach Beyond, but that is really when this vision to, although we had, like you explained, we had planned to come back to Togo one day, but we just didn't know what. But it's during those years of working with Teach Beyond that the vision for starting Teach Beyond Togo really was born, and the vision for me for starting a school of international quality for Togolese. That's when that dream was born, because I just heard story after story, like how powerfully God is using education. And I was a Christian teacher before, and so I knew like there was that God can use it, but not in the way of the stories that I was hearing. And I got to travel firsthand also and see some of those things in action. So it was really because of my years with Teach Beyond that we ended up choosing, we could have chosen a different organization, I guess, but it didn't, like, everything was so aligned. Like, it's not just because I had worked with them, but like every single thing was aligned. And so for him too, I know he at first has a little like, I'm not just going to choose them because you've been working with them. Like, he himself had to really seek it out and feel like, okay, is this really a place that he can find? And seeing that Teach Beyond views education very broadly, because for him it was sports. So sports education, of course, there's a teacher, there's a coach, right? There's students, there's players. And so feeling that there was also a way to work that and align that. So yeah, that's kind of how we got to know Teach Beyond.
Yeah, it is amazing how sometimes, like, working in administrative type roles, which, you know, Kian and I both also work in kind of this, you know, the side of Teach Beyond that is supporting the education. We're not teachers right now, and yet that connects us with teachers around the world, right? And so I can see how having that front row seat to what God's doing around the world through education then can bring to mind what a vision could look like. So how do you see that previous role working as a executive assistant playing into what you do now, Chrischona?
I feel like it was like paid training, like all to be able to walk that closely, like to be someone's assistant, right? You have a front row seat with the president of a global organization. And also the president is also national director of Canada and US. So having a front row seat, like all the different responsibilities and duties and things that are involved, very much, you can't really go to school necessarily to learn that specific of a role, but like having that time with George and then with the current president with David was definitely a huge influence for me now. And not just like the duties or the things that you do, but also just knowing Teach Beyond so deeply, like knowing the way things are done in Teach Beyond and the heart behind things. I think that makes it, I'm just prepared for this in a very different way than had I come as an outsider. I would also say the leadership, like, okay, I can get my master's in educational leadership, which I did, but like, it's when you see someone lead at a very servant leadership, a very transformational kind of leadership, and you're in the nitty gritty of it, that impacts your life. And that impacted my life so much more. I remember the first day I had an assistant here, which is just a little over a year ago. And it was like this flashback back to my first day or my first kind of week, months on the job. And it was this reversal of role. And I very much had in my mind, like how George did things or later even how David did things, but, and trying to model that. And when you see it modeled, like, then it's much easier to do yourself. And there were frequently times where I think, oh yeah, this is what George would have done. Or so it very much influenced me. And even the last couple of years where I was doing other leadership roles in Teach Beyond, being able to do those in like the safety of doing them with colleagues. Like at that point, I wasn't necessarily seeing myself as the leader. Like I had been the assistant and then I was given this leadership job, but doing that in the safety of my boss walking alongside with me, but with colleagues now when it's just alone and not having that really gave me the confidence to feel like, okay, I can also be a leader. So, I would say it was really instrumental in my time.
Yeah. How do you describe that essence of Teach Beyond, which maybe is more caught along the way as you've been working with Teach Beyond over the years? How would you describe who or what Teach Beyond is then in kind of that essence?
Teach Beyond is like a close family, even though now we're global. And I see that even so now, like I have African brothers and sisters working Teach Beyond, but Teach Beyond is at its essence this close family that is just walking together, using the tool of education and just using it faithfully while we see God using it, while we see God being at work in it. And I think it's, I don't know. I even get even now, like I've been Teach Beyond so long, but I get goosebumps literally thinking about, I love Teach Beyond, but I've just seen how God is using it so powerfully. And I used to see that a bit from a distance, and now seeing it up close, God is really doing something really special through. And I think it's because of leaders like George and David, but where there is that heart of humility. You know, we have these values, but they truly are lived out. And I hear that from like our two new teachers, where we learn the values during orientation, but they see that being lived out. And now we're starting teacher training with teachers at other schools, and the rapid way that they kind of got excited about education. I don't know how to like put that into the essence of it, but there's just something really special when there's the family of God that's come together and focusing on God and kind of letting him work through what he's given us, which is the tool of education.
For our weekly spotlight, we are focusing on the International Christian School of Togo, which is the micro school that Chrischona leads. If you want to learn more about opportunities to get involved, visit the opportunity board at teachbeyond.org/go or click on the link in the show notes.
And now back to the conversation.
As you mentioned, you've been in Togo for a little while now, and I'm curious how you've seen your family. What have you observed and learned as you've been in Togo for the first few years? And what have you seen in your family as that's taken place?
Well, in terms of being in Togo for these last years, it's a lot that I have learned or observed. But one of the most things I've learned here is one need to be really, really patient. Everywhere you go, whether it's the hospital or any public services or the market, everything, you need to be patient. If not, you won't survive. Because of the slowness of how people work, or the slowness of how they will serve the people are so slow. And then being slow, when you are used to fast service, and you're going to find yourself a little bit impatient. So one need to be slow. But on the side of observation, there's a lot to be done, like road need to be built here, hospital need to be built, overcrowded schools, lack of decent health care, no public space for enjoyment of any type of activity, sports activities, open markets, and most of the time it's when you're buying things, you have to negotiate the price. Many motorcycles on the roads, and more accidents also on the road because of people are driving carelessly, especially motorcycles. A lack of waters in rural areas, and sometimes you might give a little bit of bribe to get a service done faster. The expectation is, you give a gratitude. Some of these things, other things that when you don't know, nobody's going to be helping you, or nobody's going to be serving you, and you'll be wasting your time wondering what is happening.
I like to feel like it's prepaid tips. So, there's, if you don't give a tip before you do the service, you won't have the service done. So it's like you have to tip beforehand to get the service done. So I've had to kind of reframe the bribing mentality.
How that works.
In America now, there's all the iPads with like you tip at the register before you get your food. I feel a little bit the same way about that, Chrischona. I'm curious, you mentioned how you have to be really patient, how things go really slowly. How have you adjusted to that? How have your kids adjusted to that? Is there some perks to that? Is that something that you somewhat have learned to enjoy and appreciate, or is it still kind of a struggle?
It's kind of a struggle because on daily basis, if you go to a new place, it's still this slowness, and people never seems to be faster. So it's a struggle. But once you know what's ahead of you, once you are going out, you tell yourself, I'm going out for either the whole morning or the whole afternoon. And if you're lucky, they will serve you and you can come back faster.
On the flip side, I can see a positive in it. I wouldn't say that we've necessarily mastered it, but waiting not just on all these kind of practical types of things, which is true, but even the waiting on God, I would say for us is a big, like when you ask the question, what have we learned, observed? like waiting on God. We came here, there was no TeachBeyond Togo. There was no one else with TeachBeyond, like starting something from the ground up. There was, especially initially. Now it feels like, okay, we're finally past that initial waiting, but there was a lot of waiting on things. We're still, waiting on trying to figure out money and land and location. So I think for me, the flip side of learning to wait on God is that I am grateful, because we do need to wait on God with so much. And so maybe some of those practical things are just reminders of having to wait on God. I would say another thing for me that stands out of learning from this year is just these 3 years is learning how tangibly God really is present in the challenges, because it has been challenging for us. It has not been easy for our family. And, I think I'd heard, not that I didn't have any challenges in life before, but like when they're that intense in a small period of time of a year or 2 or 3 years, just seeing how God, he's so tangibly present, but he uses these challenges so much for growth and transformation. So, we see that in ourselves, how God has used that. And I think also just being, again, it's not something new that I learned, but just seeing how faithful God is and how good God is and how powerful how powerful he is. And it wasn't something I didn't know, but I think I've experienced those things so much more tangibly and more because these probably have been the hardest years for us in our life. And so, seeing God's faithfulness really has been kind of my big takeaway from these first few years.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with that, because moving back here, even though it might seem smooth for me, I know our children struggles with it, because it's not an environment like in the US where they have all the amenity or the stuff they are used to in America. But trusting God and depending on God is one of the things that really is happening here, and especially for myself, because for the most part, sometimes I don't know where we're going to be doing my sports activities, and but we trusted God, and somehow God provided the space, and even when this place was going to close on us, somehow God still opened it, and it's been a learning process to depend on God, and especially for myself, I've been involved in an accident, and I almost perished in that accident, but somehow God saves me. My car was totaled, but you know what? God has saved me for a reason. So I still pray He will continue to use our family here for His service, and He will help us to trust Him and depend on Him and let Him lead us in every moment of our ministry here.
I so appreciate how you both are holding the tension of there are challenges, there are things that don't work the way we might want them to, or that we have to be patient about, and also recognizing God is working in that, and he's growing things in us and in TeachBeyond Togo that we can't even imagine. And so we want to invite the opportunities to grow so that we can see what he has for us, but that is also recognizing that we're inviting challenge, even just the challenge of the slowness in that. And we know we're always talking about how these calling stories in the middle of the story, we can reflect on and celebrate and honor God's faithfulness and what he's done in our lives up until this point. But then also recognize that there's more to come. And that's exciting. And also like, wow, we don't even know what that will include. But I'd love to hear whatever you're able to share, what you're envisioning and dreaming about for the next few years or next decade. How are you sensing God is directing you? And obviously the timeline, maybe we're not quite sure, how long some of that will take to come to fruition, but what is he putting on your heart with that?
Yeah, the big picture is really developing TeachBeyond Togo. Right now, as I know both of you know, but others may not, but just that the TeachBeyond is in the season of looking at a vision for 2040, and so we're mirroring that here as well. Like we have dreams and things on our heart, but now really looking like, okay, if we're looking at 15 years down the road, what are some things now? So I would say this is, when it will happen in those 15 years, I don't know, but we are kind of looking in that same kind of time period, and really wanting TeachBeyond to be a flourishing national entity, for it to be a flourishing organization. So a big part of that is having an education center, kind of a home base, a TeachBeyond Togo home base here in. We live just on the outskirts of the capital of Lomé. And so having that where there is a school of international quality, really focused on the Togolese. It's targeting the wealthy and the influential, especially because those are the people with impact, right? With influence. So if their lives are changed, how much more broadly that influence then goes to the rest of the country. And so that was really the original vision God put on my heart that kind of brought me here, brought this step here. But that's a big part of that first step. And then related to that, having land for the sports there as well, having future things that we're not starting yet, like a language center that can be part of that, maybe even a swim school. Like in the TeachBeyond trip, I got to go to see a swim school. Like, wow, how cool would that be? So that having this kind of base that functions where we can then grow out of. And financially, also that's part of it, where the school then can help generate funds that can make some of these other things possible. So after this kind of home base of TeachBeyond Togo, then the dream is really to spread out. There's 5 major regions in Togo, and we are asking God in 15 years that we could have a TeachBeyond presence in all of those. It seems impossible. Like we're, just getting started here, but that is what we're asking God. And way up north is really part of that 1040 window, really, where one, there's so much physical poverty, but there's also so much spiritual poverty. So it's really the least access to both education and to the gospel. And so really dreaming of being able to have a presence in that part as well. There's still an unreached people group there that we are starting to pray about. And we see some of the, not necessarily the international school quality like that going around to the different countries, but using that as the launch to be able to do teacher training, which we just started with Sparrow, to be able to reach neighborhoods, which sports is kind of the main avenue with that, to provide education for kids who don't have access. So open schools, if you've been listening to the podcast, others may have heard about open schools, but really providing some education for kids who aren't in school. We also see entrepreneurial training because there are a lot of unemployed youth. If you drive anywhere in the city, there's people on the roadside trying to sell Kleenex, you can get your windshield wipers changed at a stoplight. There's just all kinds of little tiny business. And you're like, how can they even really survive? And so entrepreneur training through Work for Life program that TeachBeyond has is one we'd love to see. Some are bigger dreams that seem further away, like pastoral, church leadership training, because that is also such a need. So those are some of the in Togo dreams that we have in our strategic plan, but really on our heart. And recently, all the national directors in Togo in TeachBeyond got together in the UK. And I think our time of looking ahead even more broadly really helped me think to beyond Togo, which is not something I had been thinking about. Okay, it's hard. We're just getting started here. Really, we're going to start thinking about other countries. But I think just the encouragement, we don't have to have it all figured out, a great, TeachBeyond Togo flourishing before we can actually be part of making that happen in other countries. So we are already starting to pray about praying that God could use us, maybe Benin or Burkina Faso to the north of us. And so would love to, be used by God to help start TeachBeyond in other countries. So I would say those are the dreams and the visions and the things that we're asking God for. But it really depends on how God opens the doors. This theme of waiting on Him, He can give us these visions that we don't know, are these all from You? This is what's on our hearts. But as we go forward with timeline, it's a lot of seeing what's in our hand. Who does He bring to us? Some of that really depends on who He brings to us, because certainly it's not going to be the 2 of us, or even not the 5 of us that are in TeachBeyond Togo, who are going to do all those things, but seeing who God brings and how He opens doors and how He directs. So we ask, but we also hold loosely, knowing that ultimately God really does know which will be the best way to go for these things.
It's so interesting and amazing to hear the way God's kind of navigated your story from things maybe you totally didn't expect to now being where you are, or maybe things that kind of the breadcrumbs are there where you kind of see the track that you've gone through. I'm curious, if you look back, what's something you wish you could tell your past self? An encouragement or something? So a word of encouragement to your past self to know this is where God's going to have you now.
Oh, for me, it's going to be interesting. If I could go back or tell something about myself, is I would love to have many friends on the human level where I can connect with different people and different friends from all over. And especially in my age now, I really need friends who I will be working with closely, who will be praying with me, or with whom I will be sharing visions and stuff. So friendship is one thing I will go back and invest in as much as I will want. At the same time, I also really want to deepen my faith in God and really know the Bible by heart and be able to use it on daily basis, especially working with children and youth. Now sometimes questions pops up or things comes out of blue. But if I really know the Bible by heart, I can use Bible references to give them advice or to share more deeply the faith with them so they can see how God is speaking to them or how God is wanting to encourage them. So it's those things, and I would love to change in my life.
Well, as we're coming to a close, could you tell us a quick story, just a minute or two, about a way that you've seen God at work in your community lately?
Yes, I've seen God work in our community. Like I said, I'm more into sports, and
Mm-hmm.
being a sports, I have encountered with so many kids and many adults. But one of the things that I do as a sport person here is organize a Sunday, sports Sundays once every month through our church. And on a Sunday, the whole church and I'll invite the youth and children I'm working with, and we will all gather around and have a church in the soccer field. And the whole purpose for this Sports Sunday is to share the gospel through play and exercising. And recently, the pastors, we have a new pastors, and when we did it, the pastor's wife later saw me and said, I wish you could do this more often. And I said, well, we only does it once every 3 months. And she said, that's not enough because I have friends and family members. We try to invite them to church. They never want to come to
Uh-huh.
church. But when I invite them to a sports Sunday, they were excited. They were all dressed up. They came and they really enjoyed the sports Sunday. And from that, they said they might consider start coming to church. So
Huh.
it's been having a effect on people that's coming to church. Sometimes people are not open, but when it's the sports event, they are more open. And on that line, in my community, like I said, since I've been working for these children for these last 3 years, at the beginning, kids don't recognize me, but now, whenever the kids see me, they will run and greet me and say, Coach,
Yeah.
how are you? And so it's been changing the mentality of the kids, and I've been having close connection with these kids which is opening a door for me to get to know some of parents, so I can see God is changing the hearts and mentality. And my prayer is that God will continue to give us the space that we will be able to continue to do the sport ministry, to be able to reach more kids in our community. And those is Sports Sunday will be a draw to other people's too.
Mm.
And to further the sport ministry, I really, and my prayer is that God will give us a volunteer, whether it's from Europe or America, somewhere in the world, that will be able to come and volunteer with us, maybe throughout the year or in the summer. So uh, God has been using the sports, the education to bring transformation to uh, people in Togo. And we really appreciate if people can continue to pray for our sport ministry or our ministry in general here in Togo, that God will use us to bring his good news to others.
I won't share a story, but if you can link the November profile transformation, it's actually about our
Just came out
teacher.
today. Yeah.
And so she, it's a story how she volunteered with us and now she's one of our teachers and it's phenomenal. And just to see the change in her and how she describes her own transformation. So I'd encourage you to read that.
I love that. It is a great story, and we will definitely include a link to that in our show notes as well. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing about what God is doing in Togo and what God has done in your lives and your family. Before we let you go, we have one final question, which we ask all of our guests before we let them go. And that is, what is one thing that's changing your life? And so you're both going to have to answer this one. There's no passing it off. I'll go first, and then Heather will go, and you'll get to go last. So you have a little bit of time to think about it. What's changing my life is we just got a big monthly calendar for our wall in the kitchen, and it's been great. So I've wanted this for a long time. We have our plans, but now we get a big overview of the month. And so
Nice.
It's pretty exciting for me as a planner.
That's great. I use a separate planner just to have like a month at a glance planner. That's like all that planner does for me. And then I have like a weekly separate one because I'm with you. I need to see the whole month, even if all of that is then somewhere else. So that's great. Glad you have that. I'm also going kind of on the lighter side here. So you two feel free to, make it a little deeper. We have to do this every week, so we have some more variety. But I recently had a party that the theme was it was a plaid party. And so everyone kind of wore their flannel or plaid something. And it was fun to celebrate the season here. At least it would probably be a little too hot to wear that flannel where you guys are now. But it was a fun little celebration. So what's been changing your lives lately?
For me, having 2 teachers this year has been huge. So last year we only had 1 teacher and with 6th grade levels. Again, that even though it's not a lot of kids, it was a lot of my time went to the school side and much less to the national director side. And so having 2 teachers this year, and specifically these 2 that are just really, having 2 teachers, that has absolutely changed my life and given me more time to be on the national director side of things. So I'm very, very grateful for who God brought.
That's great.
For me, what's been changing my life is the ministry here. Before, I tend to go to the village once in a while to do sport ministry in my rural areas, but with the number of kids we are having this year, we end up having a new person, and because of that, it keeps me busy here, and I'm not being able to go to the village like I would love to go to invest also in my sport ministry there.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your story and for being with us today in this conversation and for your work there in Togo. We look forward to, we'll link to that story and to your school so that others can explore and be praying for what God's doing there in Togo. So thanks for being here today.
We really enjoyed it. Thanks for having us.
It was great to have that conversation today. Chrischona, Koudjo, Heather, and I serve with TeachBeyond, a mission organization reaching the nations through education.
Want to learn more and get involved? Visit teachbeyond.org or follow us on social media.
To help more people find the podcast and hear about TeachBeyond, we'd love it if you would leave a rating or review and share the show with a friend. Be sure you're subscribed or following the show on the platform where you listen so you never miss an episode.
And as always, you can reach us at podcast@teachbeyond.org. We'll see you next week, and Merry Christmas.